And we are live in Peterman. How's it going, man?
It's going great. Thanks for having me.
Good. So my name is Sunny Ray. This is the Sunny Ray Show. Thanks to our sponsors, Raz Rocket. Today I'm joined by Ian Peterman. The title of the talk is He Started at 12 and Now Redesigns How the World Builds Products. Ian, tell people maybe a little bit about your company, like a sentence or two, and then we'll kind of slow it down and maybe talk a little bit about your backstory and we'll work our way back up to the company.
Yeah, high level, we commercialize products. So we're really good at taking a good idea and actually turning it into a hardware product that is ready to go to market and will turn into something profitable and successful and not just a drain on your resources.
Is it true that they call hardware hardware because it's hard?
It is. I don't know if it started out that way, but that is very true.
Ian, take us back. So you grew up, I was reading earlier, surrounded by designers, engineers, accountants, entrepreneurs. What was the dinner table like in the Peterman household? Were you sketching products on napkins before you could drive, or what?
Definitely before I could drive. I've been drawing stuff since I was a little kid. And I'm actually a third generation designer. My dad taught me how to draw from like a mechanical standpoint. So I learned, I could do flowers. I do stick figures. I don't do people, but I really wanted to draw things. And it's a very different skill than like an art class. So I started drawing those things. I would draw huge. I don't know, people probably don't remember, but back when paper would have the little tear offs because it would get fed through, we had reams of that. So it was all together, and I would draw like semi trucks across like 5 pages of paper and all kinds of stuff, and really loved drawing things. And so that, combined with when I was about 12, that's when I started learning CAD, started working under my dad, doing some contract work for helping him do design work. Um, Basic stuff. Well, I did like medical racks, technology, wiring diagrams, kind of the entry level things. I also, when I was 12, I started a business with my brother doing greeting cards. And so we like hand embossed these greeting cards. So we had to learn all about running a business and keeping, inventory management. And then I got, let's see, at 16, I got an internship working at a company doing lasers. And then over that, they loved what I was doing, hired me on full time. I worked with them for another few years till 2008. Crash, and it closed a lot of things down. I got laid off, but I ended up working in their R&D team, working on defense stuff, working on medical stuff, working on all kinds of cool and interesting things they were trying out. And that got me to 18. So
Fascinating. So I was reading your earlier career reads like an incredible range of design work, right? You're working with was it lasers at Enlight? You were working on recording studio speakers at Barefoot Sound, printers at HB, even lightsabers at Saberforge. I was like doing a double take on that one.
that one
How
was fun.
did yeah?
Still
How
one of my
did
favorites.
how did working across such wildly different products prepare you for what you'd eventually come to build?
I would say that it was the perfect way to start running a design agency, because you got to know a lot of things. You have to work with a lot of different areas and know and understand the process. And that's kind of where my expertise really comes from. Is I've I can't do the cubicle thing. I tried it a few a few times. I really enjoy working on new and interesting things and cross pollinating ideas between different industries. And so that's kind of the philosophy, starting philosophy of the design firm that I run is, why don't hire people based on whether they have direct experience with things necessarily. It's, can you solve good problems? And there's always this really interesting, having worked in so many industries, what I realized is there's a lot of technology that's kind of siloed and hidden, or ways of thinking about things. Because you're like, oh, if you're in the speaker industry, they have their way of doing it, which is great. But some of that stuff really applies to other areas. It applies to different industries that if you don't cross industries, you never realize that there's usually a good solution for something probably in another industry. Like automotive might actually have a thing that they're like, oh, it works great for the seats. It's something they develop for seats. And you might cross over to baby products. We're like, well, actually, this actually works really well for strollers. But unless you work both areas, you would never realize that you're trying to solve similar problems, and you get super hyper focused. So it's I enjoy it. I enjoy that kind of crossover.
That's fascinating. And so, you also play the violin, you play soccer, and I believe through a family business called Insight Technical Education, you've been involved in publishing books for years. So, just curious, how do those kind of creative endeavors and educational pursuits outside of design feed into the way you're thinking about work?
Well, I think it's my kind of approach to that stuff is if you sit and just design for too long, you also it becomes its own silo. And so I've always found that if you do different things and you pull from those other areas, you're able to get inspiration and see things differently. And so I've always loved that. Always kept busy doing something else outside of just design worlds. And yeah, I did violin for a long time. Still play soccer. Still play the violin some. And the funny tie-in with the book business, that is actually the way my dad taught me how to draw has turned into a book series. And so we've been selling those books on how to teach little kids how to draw more technical stuff. And so that's just been going on for almost 30 years now.
Super cool. That's super cool.
Yeah.
And then at 25, you quit your stable job, right, to co-found your first design agency. Something you've said most designers your age wouldn't have dreamed of doing. What gave you the nerve to take the leap?
Um, a few things. One is I saw my dad do contract work. I knew other people who did work on their own for a while. And then I'd always doing work on the side. So is even when I was like 17, 18, I was doing, while I had a day job, I was doing contract work for other people on the side, working on small projects. And I'd reached a point in my career where I had done a lot of things. I had worked with a lot of companies. And I just really I really enjoyed the new problems that would come with a new product rather than working at the same company solving the same kind of problems over and over. And while I loved the work, I was working with Barefoot at the time. When you work with a big company, or even they weren't super huge, but you end up working with on projects where you're like, okay, well, we're going to design the next 4 years of products, and then you kind of sit there sometimes, and you're stuck in like production or things like that. And so looking around, I realized that it was time. I met some good partners at the time who also wanted to run design agency that kind of filled out my experience. So between all the partners, we had marketing, advertising, packaging, some operations things, product design, of course, and branding. And so we just decided, hey, we have all the skills. Let's go do this, and ran that for a few years. I will say we didn't figure out the pricing model quite right. We decided that, hey, this is what we wanted to do, was be this kind of business in a box and work with startups and just be like, hey, you tell us what you want to start up. We can do everything because we had the skill set. But it's a very hard market to find a really profitable way to really help people. There's a lot of scammy ways to do that, which we found out about from clients coming to us and we're like, hey, we spent this much money over here and it didn't get anything. Like, how do we deal with that? And so we ended up closing that down after a few years. But that's when I spooled up my current firm.
And you've talked about how being asked what makes your process special sent you on a year-long journey, I think in 2020, to
Yep.
define this idea of conscious design methodology. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, like you said, I was asked, how do you think differently? Like, well, how do you actually think through design? What are all the things that you're keeping in mind when you're creating a new product? You're trying to launch a new product onto the market, or a whole new brand. And I think this is something everybody should do. You should always, at some point, you should sit down and think about how you do it, because it was a great question that led to a lot of research, a lot of thinking, having to think about, like, how do I actually do this? Like, how do I when I sit down, what do I actually think about? Right? Because when you're just doing it, you don't really think about how. You're just like, I don't know. I'm designing the product. I designed this. I designed the business. Here's the branding. Here's the positioning. Right? You just do it. And so forcing myself to slow down and actually think about, like, oh, what do I think? What is the process? What am I being aware of? What are those inputs? What am I looking for? And ultimately, that turned into a book. So I have a conscious design book that I co-authored with my wife. And that, in order to do that, I wrote down my design philosophy, how I think about things. And then I ended up doing a lot of research to find companies that were good examples, because I hate to be just like, hey, here's the idea, and not have anything you can show people. Be like, hey, look at this. This is a good example. And through finding all those examples, I realized there was a lot of people doing some or most or part of it. And that's why I launched a podcast to interview those people, because I think it was really interesting learning about them. And now it's a podcast and a book. And Conscious Design House, spelled HAUS, is now kind of this entity that's set up to be a platform. The goal right there is to be able to help other designers in how they think through and what the design thinking process is. And specifically, it's like how to design for circular economy, which is ultimately what I realized was how I was thinking about products, and that model matched. So yeah, now it's out there.
So you decided to think about thinking.
Yes.
So I guess
experience.
You went on to develop this thing called the Peterman method with your partner,
Yes.
Jessica. So she brought, I guess, nearly 20 years of experience in healing and regenerative technologies. How did her perspective fundamentally change the way you thought about product design? And was there a moment where her world and your world merged?
There's not like a singular moment. It's just more of, when you sit and you talk about design and how you're going to make things and how you're going to develop things. Her perspective really brought in like regenerative things, and how do you go beyond just recycle? Like, recycling is cool, but how do you go, like, what are the next things? How do you think about it that way? And so it was really great bringing her into that process and having her share. And so, I think it wouldn't be quite the same at all, actually, without that extra input and having somebody that's not a designer. Because like I said, like, if you're a designer, you're kind of in the design bubble, and you could be really good, but if you don't interact with and bring somebody out from the outside, you end up in a bubble. It might be a big bubble, but it's still a bubble. And that was one of the main kind of things about the conscious design approach, is really realizing what your bubble is and realizing how many people are actually involved in something, and how do you bring in that human element. And so what Peterman method is we took this conscious design framework of, like, this is how the meta version, right? Of this is how you think. And then the Peterman method is basically, if you take that to product development, this is what it looks like. And that's, how I execute with that kind of thinking. That became the Peterman method. But conscious design as a, design thinking method, it really is something. Design thinking can be applied to everything. It can be applied to business. It can be applied to marketing, right? It doesn't have to be just, I'm going to develop a product and how do I design the product. Good design thinking, most things are design. If you're making choices and limiting, making constraints and making decisions, it's a design thinking process.
Ian, what's consciousness?
what is consciousness?
Yeah, that
It,
wasn't on my list of questions, but I mean, like, if you're talking about conscious design, try taking a swing at that one.
yeah, I mean, for me, really, it's you. Like, what makes you unique, right? That I don't know that you could dive we could dive really deep into like conscious. What is the meaning of all of it? Um, but I think consciousness is being able to part of it is being able to make decisions. And when they're part of why we called it conscious design is it's also awareness, right? And a lot of times you design, you build stuff, you have a narrow field. It takes a lot of thinking and a lot and concerted effort to really widen your field and become conscious of and aware of everything that actually is impacted or connected to what you're building. And that's kind of where we pulled that from.
Do you believe consciousness is a local phenomena or a non-local phenomena?
Mm, I think it's everywhere.
Hmm.
I don't think it's yeah. I can't say that it's like a concentrated. I think it's obviously we have it. We're sitting here having a conversation, right? But as far as like it being a decentralized versus centralized, decentralized makes way more sense.
Is ChatGPT conscious?
Oh man,
Not yet.
no, no, I don't think
Never
so.
will be. Yeah, right. So, okay, let's go back to it. So, before you required discovery phases for your clients, you watched project after project fail for avoidable reasons. Can you walk through a failure, yours or a client's, that was the final straw and made you say, "We're never skipping research again"?
Yeah, I think again, I don't think that was like a final straw. It was really the discovery came about because we started to see better success. So we had a few projects where we got the client to do a discovery. We spent more time and effort in that phase, and they were interested and willing to do that. Because before it's kind of an optional, like, all right, we can do this or we can dive in, and doing that allowed us to. We were able to give more accurate quotes. We were able to identify some problems early on, and it made the project smoother. So we were able to go through the process with them better and kind of just in a review, really, another self review, but kind of the process of the firm and how we engaged with clients. Um, that's when we just kind of realized like, hey, these projects that we've done a discovery with, that we've spent the time, it takes 6-8 weeks to go through it. It does take time, but we have happier clients. We have more on time projects, right? It was pretty clear that better overall. And so then we started to dive into, okay, why have these other, like we have these quote unquote bad projects, right? Projects that didn't go as well, didn't go how we wanted to, client never launched the product, right? And we started to go through like, okay, well, what's missing? Was it something, if we applied this discovery process that we had developed and we kind of tested it, we came with this process, we tested it for about a year with clients and got their feedback, got our team's feedback, right, on what are we solving for, how is this able to help, and measured that against like, hey, what are the problems that came up in old ones, and some of the things were like, oh, not realizing this regulatory body over here was, nobody knows about it, but hey, if you make something in that space, they become the most important thing in the world. And so realizing that, okay, a lot of this would be solved by just requiring a discovery of our clients and using as a filter too, because if you're not willing to do that research, and kind of going back to conscious design philosophy, one of the first things we do in the Peterman method, applying that, is you have to do some research. You have to know your why. You have to know what are you really solving for. You have to understand all of those things. And if you don't go through, like everybody, you can off the cuff. You can be like, hey, what are you building? What are you trying to do? Right? You can off the cuff answer that. But that's way different than going through a process that asks a lot of detailed questions. Like we start with, I think it's about a 50-page questionnaire. That's the start. and then we do an interview, and then we spend 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks in research, and then we come back and we present what we find and our recommendations. Um, and also just looking at other fields. Like my wife works in the medical space, and she was like, well, every time somebody you go to a new doctor, it doesn't matter if they have a history of some working with someone else. There's always a review. They always do an exam. They always take a look, and it's not just like so you can rack up dollars. It's because you have to look at it from your lens, right? You got to look at it, and that's part of why you go to multiple people. And so thinking about like product development, right? You're trying to solve a problem. You're probably coming to someone like me because you're stuck in some way, or you know that you're not the expert and you want to bring an expert in. Many other fields, they require, like you go to an attorney, you go to doctors, they're like, yeah, we're going to actually set aside some time and we're going to dive into this and examine everything, order some x-rays, do some research, whatever it is, right? And then we'll give you a professional opinion rather than just being like, yeah, I think it's this, and kind of throwing it out there. And that ultimately, I have to say, worked really well, taking that model and going, we got to actually dig. Let's not off the cuff anything, because the chance of missing something is too high, and you end up with grumpy clients if they don't. If you're right, then great, like everybody loves you, but
Yeah, that resonates. So you today run a 4-day work week, right? Taking essentially a full month off each year, and have completely rejected the whole grind until you succeed culture. How did burning out at your first agency reshape, not just your schedule, but your entire philosophy on, what a successful business looks like?
yeah, I mean, I spent probably a year undoing about 3 years of damage from that first company. So it, having to recover, it was good. Like afterwards, it was great, and realizing the difference it was between like, oh, super healthy me and the end of 3 years, like that difference is huge. Like I can't imagine going back and willingly going and doing what I did before. So I think that like having that contrast of just, wow, I feel great. This is good. I have energy. I'm awake. I'm able to think clearly, right? All those things compared to what I was. That's like a huge piece of just, I can never do that again. And then, things like, was it the 3 hour work week and other
4-hour work week.
4 hour, there you go, 4 hour work week, and other people have done this or figured out a way to massively reduce their hours and still give output. And there's more and more research, right? In Europe, there's multiple countries that are looking at making a 4-day work week. I think it was even Microsoft did a test where the 4-day work week, they proved higher productivity than 5. And so now there's more and more research to show that this makes sense. And so that just kind of, all that combined, I decided that it's more important to, you can be more efficient. And I'm actually working on reducing to a 3-day right now.
Oh my God, dude. Sign me up.
It's just,
I love it.
It's a mental shift, because we culturally, we equal, like output equals hours in, and that is not true. Every hour is not equal. You will have good hours and you will have bad hours, and if you work the bad hours, you're not actually doing it. Most of the time you're not actually doing anything, or you're working at 1/10 the capacity at best, which means you're spinning your wheels, and then that's how you get the burnout, because that you're not producing where you should be, and so you're like, well, I'll just add 9 more hours and I'll get there. I'll get to 100% capacity. I just shove more hours into it, and which is the wrong way to do it. You need to take a break. You need to going back to like doing other things, like go do something else, go do a hobby, go take a break mentally from this kind of work. And if you do that, you can't have that kind of balance if you're working 60, 70. And my first agent, I was working 100-hour weeks.
Jeez.
And I did that for 3 years. It doesn't work. I'm here to tell you it does not actually work. So
Yeah.
it's more rest. You're able to be more like really, you got to think about it. If nothing else, like even ignoring your health, like efficiency. Why would you take 10 hours to do something you could do in 30 minutes if you were awake and alert?
Mm.
Why would you do it? That's horrible.
Mm.
Like we optimize everything else. Like you talk to any startup and they're like, oh, I figured out how to eliminate this tool. I figured out how to eliminate this code. I figured out, but nobody is thinking about like the efficiency of your own brain. And if you think about it from that model, there is no other option. You need to have your mind at peak capacity, use it while it's at peak, and then stop running it. Like why would you run an inefficient program?
Yeah.
You wouldn't. It's really inefficient. Let me put that in there. So it takes 10 times as long to do whatever it's supposed
You're
to do.
making mistakes, or you're just stressing out for no reason, making bad calls. I mean, yeah.
I mean, think about it, like it's mistakes. Like you don't even think about that. But if your mistakes go up, like how many more hours is it gonna take you to fix that?
To fix that.
It's
I had a maybe not the same epiphany. Well, first of all, I love the 3-day work week, and maybe that's where AI has taken us. Maybe it's not going to be Terminator, but more like you have time to spend with your kids, or go to the gym, or whatever.
We'll get
2-day work week, yeah. Why not? Why not? I'm all for it. Yeah, well, Ian, great interview. Yeah, love the energy. I love that name, Conscious. Is it Conscious Design? And can people pick up this book on Amazon or?
Yeah, it's on Amazon. The podcast is on Amazon too.
Nice.
You can go to consciousdesignhouse.com. And that'll give you'll see everything. And link to the book is on there as well. But yeah.
Cool. Well, I love it. Thanks. Well, Ian, thanks for your time. I really appreciate it. And I guess until next time, bring this one to an end.
Sounds good.